People love our rhythms, and that's what they dance to. The percussion, the rhythm. They don't dance to a flute player or violin player. They dance to the conga drum, the bongo drum, the cowbell, the timbales. You know, that's what people really dance to.
The Latin Breakdown, hip-hop's Latino Connection, will take you on a sonic journey that commenced in our ancestral home of Western Africa and into the Caribbean, from the rebellious sounds of Puerto Rico's Bomba at the turn of the 1500s to the earliest Afro-Cuban bands that impacted the sound of jazz in New York City's tango cafes during the late 1910s, birthing some of New York City's signature genres such as Latin jazz, Latin funk, Nuyorican Soul, Bugalú, all the way up to the era of Fania Records, to how American musical genres adopted the Afro-Caribbean percussive breakdowns onto genres like funk, soul, disco, and eventually the earliest iteration of rap music. This documentary will focus on how the cóngas, timbales, bongós, el cencerro, and la clave became fundamental in the music that was being played in the park jams in the South Bronx, at the Bboy strongholds like PS 129, Junior High School 118, and St. Martin of Tours, just to name a few. These Latin groove-laced B-boy anthems is what made the breakers break and still break to this day. The foundation for the culture of hip-hop are the B-boys, no doubt. They are the X factor. But check this out. The foundation for the B-boys are the breaks.
We cannot talk about hip-hop culture without speaking of the traditional B-boy anthems. The traditional B-boy breaks are part of hip-hop's history. The more famous of the breaks are the incredible bongo band Apache, Captain Sky, Super Sperm, Ralph McDonald, Jam on the Groove, All of these anthems have one thing in common: the very heavy presence of Latin percussive instruments.
Everyone was there. It's amazing because, you know, I have a lot of Latin in my music. It's amazing, I mean, because I had been playing New York clubs and building a reputation just playing dances and bar mitzvahs and weddings. And then I got into the clubs like the Cheetah, Trudy Heller's, Big Wilt Small's Paradise, the Club Baron. I became the king of the dancers, Tito Puente and myself. We started, so being around a lot of Latin, Joe Cuba, Tito Puente, Ricardo Rey, those were my favorites. I could hear that. And, you know, I'm from Bermuda, basically, my family anyway. So you have that Latin thing within you. And Johnny Pacheco was making great cowbells at the time. So, and so I learned authentic music through Tito Puente and those guys. Hala Hala, Bugalú. You know, get down, get down.
Whose idea was it to have that massive break, that world-famous break in the song?
Peace Will Come, the World West?
The drum solo, the drum break.
Oh, the breakdown.
Yeah.
Mine. Of course, you got to have the Latin. I had to go to the timbales. The only way you can do it is for to break it down so I can get to the timbales.
Who played the timbales on the track?
Me.
You did all the drum work?
Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, I could definitely hear the Tito influence on that.
Oh, yeah.
The inspiration for the B-boy anthems can be traced to the original Latin descarga that was played at places like the Palladium Ballroom in the 1940s, with people like Machito and his Afro-Cubans, Tito Puente, Chano Pozo, Tito Rodriguez, Mario Bausat, and others. It was these descargas that would inspire the Latin go-offs that you hear in the traditional B-boy anthems.
Latinos have always created it their own way, no matter what. And we've been a part of everything, every genre of music. We have Latinos in hip-hop, we have Latinos in R&B, we have Latinos in rock, we have Latinos in opera. We do it all.
If he's specifically speaking about the conga drum, the timbales, and bongo, even though all drumming stem from Africa, because it's the idea of using wood, trunks, and skin, but the drumming in Africa are more like ngoma drums. The drums in the Caribbean are different than the drums in Africa. The conga drums, because named after the Congo, because the beats are Congolese beats, like the cha-cha and guaranco, really come from the Congo. There's a migration from the Congo, Gabon, Congo, and Nigeria.
A lot of us have an internal consciousness that comes straight out of Africa. And when we come into contact with it, whether it's in the form of salsa, whether it's in the form of santero, rumba, whether it's in the form of Brazilian music, we know that this is the music.
A certain sound and a certain movement to that sound. This goes back to the plena, goes back to bomba.
Bomba is one of the oldest musical traditions in Puerto Rico. Born from the fusion of Taino, Spanish, and African influences, it's a genre that expresses the feelings and the stories of the enslaved and oppressed Arawak Taino and African people. It was through drums, songs, and dances. Bomba's a conversation between the dancer and the drummer who respond to each other's cues and rhythms, but nothing is rehearsed. The Spanish made many trips to and from Puerto Rico and Spain, and they eventually began to bring West Africans to Puerto Rico. Bomba takes place in the bate, the Taino word for the place where the aretos were traditionally held. The aretos were ceremonial dances and songs that the Tainos performed to honor their gods and ancestors. Our Taino ancestors created musical instruments such as the maraca, the guasticks, the mayowacan drum, and the guaye, also known as the guiro.
Goes back to danza. You know what I'm saying? Goes back to palenque. Goes back to all these Latin, these Afro-Latin, Afro-Caribbean movements. You go into the 70s, you got the B-boy anthems. The Puerto Ricans are all in it, to quote my man, track 2. We're all in it.
Bomba has its origins in the years between the late 1500s and the early 1600s, when Puerto Rico was known as Boriquen, the indigenous name of the island. This was also the colonial period when the Spaniards invaded the island of Boriquen, where the Taino inhabited. Bomba and hip-hop have similarities. Both are based on the mixture of Taino and African heritage and represent the realities and aspirations of their people. They both go off into a call and response. For hip-hop, it's a communication between the DJ and the b-boy. In Bomba, it's a communication between the dancer and the drummer.
Hip movements on the ground as we're doing circular footwork, clockwise and counterclockwise. You know what I'm saying? We're doing transitions into freezes and movements that are different. I mean, I'm talking about the foundational b-boy movements that are different from some of the other b-boy styles that don't have a transitional style or hip or rotational movements. Those come specifically from Latin styles of dancing.
many, many years since the early 1900s, being involved in every single genre of American music, ragtime and jazz, when it was turning from ragtime into jazz.
His name is James Reese Europe. His family moved to Washington, D.C., and then eventually he wound up in New York City in 1904. This is where it starts getting interesting. In 1914, the citizens of Harlem, they petitioned the governor of New York State to grant them their own military unit to be based in Harlem. They hired James Reese Europe. He got the rank of lieutenant, and he created an ensemble. And this group, what they did, which is really important, was they created a new sound. This gentleman here, Rafael Hernandez, one of the most important composers of music from Puerto Rico, well, he happens to be, he was a trombonist. And what happened was James Reese Europe was ordered by his superiors in the United States Army to go to Puerto Rico and recruit dark-skinned musicians to join his military outfit. Musicians in places like Puerto Rico, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Panama, etc., were known for their excellent musical training. The reason why I like to stress about people like Rafael Hernandez in particular, or these Latinos who are involved in these groups, a lot of historians will still consider Latin jazz or Latinos' involvement in jazz, because that's what this is about at this point. This is Latinos' involvement in jazz. Many historians will only focus on what happened in the latter part of the 1940s with Dizzy Gillespie recording with Chano Pozo, or Charlie Parker recording with the Machito Orchestra. Then that's when they start saying, oh, that's when Latinos started to get involved. And that's really not accurate. This is another very important individual. His name was Rafael Bob Escudero. Now, let's first talk about Fletcher Henderson. Fletcher Henderson's band was one of the most important bands to help to develop the sound of what was to become known as a swing era or the big band sound. Fletcher's band was in the 1920s. He was already putting together an ensemble that was not a mirror of what was happening in New Orleans. New Orleans music at the time had a trumpet player, a clarinetist, and a trombonist, and usually doing like a collective improvisation thing. Well, no, in Fletcher's situation in New York City in the 1920s, he was already doing elaborate arrangements for large ensembles. So here's Bob Escudero, he's from Manatí, Puerto Rico, born in 1898. But he was a tubist, he was a tuba player from Puerto Rico who settled in New York City and wound up being a member of the Fletcher Henderson Orchestra. Of course, we all love the great Duke Ellington. But in his band was a great valve trombonist from Vega Baja, Puerto Rico. His name was Juan Tisol. But his compositions are really important because even till this day, they are part of the library of the Duke Ellington Orchestra. So here he is as a gentleman from Puerto Rico on the band. He befriended Duke when they were both residing in Washington, D.C. before Duke made his second trek to New York City in the 1920s. And so Tisol was a member of the band for quite some time, and his compositions were used in the band. In the earlier versions of Caravan, they're playing like an exotic kind of style of music. It's not like a swing style. It has a lot of percussion type of sounds, not traditional percussion instruments like from Latin America, but the drum set's playing in a style that was not really the way swing bands are playing. And let's not forget something else. Duke, during the period of the latter part of the 20s into the early 30s, he was the house band at the Cotton Club, where they had to create new music constantly. He had to write new music for these shows that would come in for a month at a time, and there were floor shows with exotic dancers. And the focus of this whole thing was exotic music, and they called it jungle music, darkest Africa, and Duke Ellington. And the thing was that all of the dancers were African American. The female dancers had to be light skinned, but Duke was in the middle of that, and they were experimenting with sounds that could be considered highly connected with Latin America at the time, because it was not a swing style. It was a different approach to the sound.
What I love is that we are a creative people. We don't need samples. The best thing about Latin artists in the 70s, 80s, 90s, actually going back 40s, 50s, 60s, orchestration. We believed in live instrumentation.
Had it not been for the Cuban musicians coming across the Gulf of Mexico, jazz would have had a different tinge. It would have been very linear. It was the Latin tinge, if you will. John Storm Roberts has a book called The Latin Tinge. It would have been very different had it not had that influence. Congo Square was as much a Latino square as it was an African-American square. Remember that the Latinos who came here were much closer to the African matrix than were even the African-Americans who were here.
The Afro-Latin instrumentation was being experimented with way before my time. Duke Ellington had people join his band. And then you had legendary congueros like Armando Peraza, you had Machito, you had Bongo Santa Maria.
So one of the first records that you actually see this Cuban rhythm with the jazz mix that became very popular was Manteca.
Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie, from 1945 on, right after the war, were instrumental in developing a new form of music called Cuba, a mixture of Cuban and bebop. Chano Pozo was considered one of the premier congueros in Cuba at that time.
If you go back to the 1500s, you had the Spanish colonies and the French colonies in the U.S. that have their African slaves. And these are slaves that came from Cuba, from Haiti, and brought some of these things to the United States, but they were cut short. You know what I'm saying? Once this becomes the U.S., once those colonies are ended, that attachment is no longer there. We're the ones that retain this, that we're allowed to retain. So this comes into New York City over 100 years ago. Then this impacts jazz. Again, this is why you have Dizzy Gillespie. This is why you have Manteca. This is why you have all this new sound coming up, a cross-pollination of cultures and music and sounds.
Chano Pozo has this great song, and it's one of the biggest b-boy anthems they use today. Manteca. I mean, redid 1,000 times over, but you know, Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie were the ones that put it together. You go to a Red Bull vinyl, and they're playing Manteca.
I've been interested in Cuban music since like 1938 because they had some bands used to come in the Savoy Ballroom, and they let me sit in, play. So I've been with it.
Dizzy told me backstage at Lincoln Center when I did a concert with all that I promoted a concert. He said, when I heard it, I knew. He said, Felipe, when I heard that music, it was as if I had been waiting for this all my life. It's amazing coming from a guy like Dizzy Gillespie, who comes out of Florence, South Carolina. He said, I knew that was it.
When I was getting ready to organize my big band, I consulted Mario. I said, Mario, man, I want one of those guys that play them tom-tom things, I didn't even know the name of this thing. And Mario said, I got the guy just for you, but he doesn't speak English. I said, So Mario came by my house. I was living at 2040 7th Avenue, and took me down into the Spanish Harlem to Chano's house. And Chano was there with his lady, and then we sat down and talked. And so he said, yeah, I want to join the band in Spanish, whatever that was. So Chano came with me.
Eddie Bongo Brown, which is the conga player, percussion player for the Funk Brothers, which everyone knows that was the Motown sound, which he was original member of it, starting in 1959. So all throughout the 60s into the early 70s, any percussion that you heard on the Motown sound was through him. And one of his inspirations was Chano Pozo.
And Chano was funny, man. He understood a lot of English, but he couldn't speak it. So somebody asked him one time, say, "Hey, Chano, how do you communicate with Dizzy? You don't speak Spanish, you don't speak." He said, Dixie no pigi pani, no speak English, but we speak Africa. You know, so that's how we came together.
In that record, if you listen to it, there's a section that you only hear the conga. Boom, kaka, taka, dun, dun, kaka. He does a conga solo. It's like a breakdown.
After he had recorded several albums and played before awestruck audiences, he felt right at home and started bringing Dizzy his compositions.
The Channel came to me we were out in California, and he said, "I got the ID, man." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah." He said, "Barrel, bass." He said he played boom, 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 boom. Now this is the first time in jazz that the bass player wasn't playing boom, 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 boom. It's the first time because I hadn't heard none of the bass. All the bass players were talking about boom, 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 boom. So Channel said the bass player first, power, boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. And he said, saxophone, boom, bing, boom, bing, boom, bing, me, boom, bing, boom, bing. Right it out as he talked. I don't know this kind of trombone, boom, 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 boom. Know this kind of trombone, boom, 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 boom. Trumpet, boom, ping, boom, ping, boom, bah, boom, ping, boom, ping, boom, bah, boom, boom. So we had this rhythm going. So now, when I looked at these different parts on the thing that I'd written, I said, wait a minute now, we need something else. We need harmony. But it wasn't complete. It wasn't complete harmonically. It was just lots of rhythm, and it was going. So I say to myself, you must do something to make harmony in this. So and then I wrote this bridge. Da 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 da. And so that's how Manteca came about.
Black folk and white folk, but particularly Black Americans, were listening to is the bending of the notes, the bending of the rhythms. Doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 was not enough. We were doing clave, very different, 3, 2. Or we were doing 2, 3, pop, 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 pop. Black musicians stood with their mouths open. They said, well, how can you play to that? And that was our way of keeping Africa in our rhythm.
And the band was called Machito and his Afro-Cubans. They wound up calling it that.
To call yourself an Afro-Cuban in the 30s was tantamount to revolution. Not one band before Machito did it. Not one. Puente didn't do it. And he was younger then. Rodriguez didn't do it. Arsenio didn't even do it. Machito calls himself Machito and the Afro-Cubans. He was not afraid to say he was Black. He was not afraid to say his music descended from Yoruba people and from the Congolese.
But the band was made up of African Americans. The rhythm section was mostly Puerto Rican. It was an interesting mix of African Americans and Latinos from different places, all together, really playing now what is going to be considered a very new style of music.
We owe a great deal of gratitude to Latin music for the timbales, the bongos that they play. Barry White always has a bongo or a conga player there, sometimes playing a very simple beat, but at least they're playing it. Stevie Wonder has done that. James Brown has done that. The conga drum was not popular among African Americans. It was popular among Caribbeans.
The descarga comes from the Afro-Cuban rhythms. As long as we've had Afro-Latin percussions in a band, we've had the descarga. This has nothing to do with the feeling or the jazz improvisational sessions. The descarga pertains to Latin music. The Latin breakdown correlates with the b-boy anthems and the Latin breaks. When it comes to Pumpkin, Pumpkin didn't utilize the breaks. He created all original music. Some of those early rap records became breaks, and they were all Latin infused via the instrumentation. There are various modern Latin breaks that are used today in b-boy circles, battles, and global competitions. This is the standard. There's various Latin b-boy mixes. You can find them on YouTube, and these are inspired by the original Latin descarga.
I definitely remember records like Bongo Rock, Apache, Just Begun, and I recognized early that all those records had elements of Latin percussions, and those were the parts, those were the, the quote-unquote breaks that made the break dancers break and that made the people dance a little harder.
Let's take a look way, 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 way back when break boys started, What do you think they were dancing off of? Apache. You would go in the block and you would see a whole bunch of Puerto Ricans just hitting cóngas and stuff like that right on the corner.
One person that really you have to mention is Cachao. First time you hear the word descarga was Cachao. One thing that percussion does, percussion is a form of frequency. It's a percussive frequency. And what that does, it makes the body move.
What did Puerto Ricans bring from Puerto Rican culture? Well, I have family. My family has traditionally been of the Yoruba religion, and those are all about African rhythms. So my family was bringing African culture to New York City through the religion and through the playing of the percussion, which reminds me of, Bongo Rock and all those records that were break heavy.
Arsenio Rodriguez, and it was actually, the mambo was actually a section in the record where the dancers would go off, or like, it'd be that section. So this reminds me of the breaks, it's the exact same thing.
When I look at some of the old footage of some of, for instance, in Mambo Madness, these guys dancing, boom, and they drop on the floor and do some around the world front sweeps, I get chills.
But then you had the mambo era, like I said before, the whole Afro-Latin jazz fusion, which predates a lot of the funk. So, those elements carried over into the funk.
The rhythm, the beat, the percussion, everything about the percussion gave us life. It became a part of your soul, your heartbeat. B-boys have tapped into percussion, which is every beat, every rhythm, every sound. Dum, 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 dum. Dum, 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 dum. Doesn't matter the speed, doesn't matter the rhythm. We tap into it. The rhythm is real, and B-boys, we made it what it is.
It's hard to quantify exactly how many ways Puerto Ricans and Latins influence hip-hop, Hip-hop wasn't being done in New York in a void. When the rappers looked out into the crowd, they saw, like Fat Joe said, about half of the crowd was Puerto Rican and half of the crowd was black. People on stage were in half and half, but the people in the crowd were about half and half. So you're not going to tell me that didn't influence the artists.
The Nuyorican kids who were dancing the early forms of hip-hop saw what their parents were dancing. Even though salsa didn't give birth to hip-hop, these two vibrant musical forms came of age in the same place, and it was the South Bronx and its people that made them what they are.
you take Eddie Palmieri's Azúcar part 2 and part 3, right? Off the Live at Sing Sing album, where he has a Harlem River Drive band along with his regular Latin band performing together.
Take the sugar, sugar for you, sugar for me. Sweet, 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 sweet sugar, sweet, sweet sugar. Can you feel it?
You're seeing this. I'm going to call it a clash, but it doesn't clash. It's a marriage, right? But you're seeing like this force of Latin music meet this force of funk.
They were looking for these beats, and they found them wherever they could find them. These DJs were searching for a beat that nobody else was playing, from Kool Herc to whatever. And those beats were found in every genre of music.
When you hear songs like Funky Music Is the Thing, which is a B-boy break, you hear the you hear the cowbell.
There's no way you could be brought up in those 5 boroughs, walk in the 70s, 60s and 70s, walk around the street and not run into somebody playing cóngas in the street. A group of guys playing cóngas in the street. So the B-boys, again, grew up listening to this. So that's the descarga. What the B-boys are doing, they're just doing it with their body. It's a descarga.
You hear these interviews by Mario Bausa, Batato, Gilberto Santa Rosa, all these Latin greats. They'll tell you drums, and that's where these break beats come from.
Cucara Maraca by the Harvey Aburn bands, and these are Latin funk records that are just straight departures from just anything that had existed. It's sonically a new sound.
I'd like to know, are you really ready for some super dynamite soul? Thank you, because now it's start time. Introducing the world's greatest entertainer, Mr. Dynamite, the amazing Mr. Please Please himself, the hardest working man in show business. Ladies and gentlemen, the star of the show.
We cannot talk about hip-hop and the breaks without talking about the godfather of soul, James Brown. The quintessential b-boy anthem, Give It Up and Turn It Loose, is loved by both rockers and breakers alike. The conga player on Give It Up and Turn It Loose was John Griggs. Griggs previously played with Latin greats such as the Larry Harlow Orchestra, the Fania All-Stars, and Ishmael Miranda. So Griggs was familiar with Latin rhythms. In the obituary of John Talib Griggs, we read the following statement. He began playing at nightclubs in Newark and New York. He was called the master of percussions. One night at the Apollo Theater, some musician mentioned John to James Brown. James Brown told him, "I like the way you play. Go home and get your conga drums." He told the band, "We need ourselves a conga player." In songs like We Got to Change, we can hear the guaguango rhythm.
1, 2, 3, 4. Clap your hands. Yeah. Stomp your feet. Yeah. Get on the line. Yeah. Swing on the vine. Yeah.
The Latin rhythms are also prevalent in songs like Bring It Up,
Gather round. Clap your hands.
and Give It Up and Turn It Loose.
Clap your hands. Stomp your feet. In the jungle, brother. In the jungle, brother.
when we're talking about the conga rhythm that we hear in Give It Up, Turn It Loose, there are some people that would say that rhythm has nothing to do with Latin, Latino, nothing to do with it. That's totally African. And this is just a showing that people who are not percussionists do not understand what's really being done here. It is a conga rhythm from the Gullah Geechee, right? Which is a palo congolese rhythm from Cuba, migrating to the south. The second pattern that accompanied the tumbao in rumba is the palo rhythm that came from the palo mayombe from Cuba, when many Congolese people settled. And you see this same pattern in Bomba from Puerto Rico, foundational to the rumba African-Cuban sound. That's what we hear in Give It Up, Turn It Loose.
The breaks are the essence of hip-hop. They are the parts where the music stops and only the drums and the vocals continue. Jimmy Delgado played the breaks live on his timbales on the song These Are the Breaks by Curtis Blow. This song, released in 1980, was the first rap song to sell over 500,000 copies and earn a gold record. It was also the first rap song to feature live breaks on the timbales, and it was dedicated to all of the b-boys who could dance and break to the rhythmic and dynamic effect of the breaks. Now, Jimmy Delgado improvised with Curtis Blow, who was rapping over his grooves. He used his timbales to match the flow and lyrics of Curtis Blow, and he also used two bells to add contrast. He played with speed, soul, and Latin flavor, and he brought the timbales to life with his fire and spice.
Well, these are the breaks. Break it up, break it up, break it up!
Jimmy Delgado, a very famous timbalero who still plays today, has a gold record because he played the timbales solo on The Breaks by Curtis Blow.
When I think of Tito Puente, I think of his amazing talent and charisma as a timbales player. He was the best in the world, and he made the timbales sound like no one else.
And it goes by the name of Tito Puente.
Questlove, hit me up about a year ago, and he was just blown away. Tito Puente played on Sugar Hill Gang's first album, 1979, 1980, when it came out. And you look at the album, it says special appearance by Tito Puente. And my dad, who's the foremost historian on Latin music, Joe Conzo Sr., hit me to that and told me the story. And the story, real quickly, is that Tito Puente got a phone call from Morris Levy, and Morris asked Tito, can you go over to Inglewood, New Jersey, and meet up with Sylvia Robinson? And, Tito knew who Sylvia Robinson was, and they're putting together an album, a rap album. And Tito showed up, and my dad was there, and, in walks Tito Puente, and there's these three, 16 and 17 years old kids. And Master G, I have a video of him speaking about that day. And it's called Sugar Hill Groove. And if you listen to the clip, Master G and the rest of the Sugar Hill gang, it goes, and now on timbales is Tito Puente. And Tito Puente does this, 2-minute timbales break. And that was it. And left. Did it in one take. That was Tito Puente's, nickname. One take Tito.
So let's start from the early beginning. Junior high school, 136. All right. And so I'm in the 6th grade. And I am collecting 45s. I'm buying them. And I'm playing at the little clubs, the little hooky parties and everything. And just playing 45s for them. And I didn't know I was a DJ then. I had the records and I just played it. And a lot of people were dancing and they would invite me out, bring your records. And I'll bring my stack of 45s and all that. And that's when I didn't know, but I kind of felt that vibe like, wow, this is cool what I'm doing. And I got really popular with that.
When I started working at the Ipanema, that evolution was already on a different level. But pre-disco days, back into the early 70s, 70, 71, 72, where you had these clubs like the Footsteps, the 310.5, the Kontiki, the Jungle.
So when I got older, now I was old enough to try to pass as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old to get into the clubs. I still didn't have no facial hair, but I was able to pass myself to get in. And I was hearing about all these DJs, and it was fascinating to me because I met a guy named Francisco Diodonet, and Francisco Diodonet used to be a dancer, and he used to dance with a group called the Latin Timbales. And Eddie Ramonde, George Vascones, Dante, all of them were part of that group. And it was just fascinating to see them dance because now I'm going to different parties. And these parties were in house parties, basements, stuff like that. Disco was blown up. We're hearing it all over the place. And the real club that I went to was the 310.5. And the 310.5 was on the second landing. So it was on Westchester Avenue near Prospect. And we used to go up to that club and everybody was dancing.
When I started DJing in the mid-90s in clubs and specifically at Rock Steady Crew events for B-boys and B-girls, I felt like my twist on it was that because yo soy Boricua, I was able to bring a sensibility of not just the known breakbeats, but also Latin records that spoke volumes to the same sort of ethos that the breakbeats had.
The Latino movement thrived on these breaks.
I was introducing constantly new rhythms that people were unaware of or detached from or forgotten to the dance floor so that we could raise the vibration.
I go around to every DJ that I could find. I'm going to different clubs. So I'm going to the Starship Discovery one. I'm going to La Maganette. I'm going to the Ipanema.
The Afro-Caribbean, the Afro-Latin sound, the clave, the cowbell, the cascara, which is the side of the timbale, that stuff was already integrated in soul, funk, and rock music.
If you were Boricua, right, and you hear Latin music that your mom and your dad are playing on the regular, you're hearing elements of it at the jam now, where you're out of the context of your parents' love for the island and love, could be Cuban, could be Puerto Rican, could be Dominican, whatever it was. You take that out of the context and now you hear it in a new context, but you're hearing the familiarity of the bongo, the timbales.
If anybody understands our
our makeup, our DNA, our makeup. Percussion is something that drives us. If you listen to any Latin record, when that ring comes on a Latin record, boy, we're dancing with the girl turning around. We're doing it's the same thing when we hear any other record. So this percussion beat was something that these guys used not only to incite the crowd, but to talk to the crowd.
Funny story, I was DJing at an event and Kool Herc walks in. And he stays and he's like hanging out in the booth with me, and now he's like here. I'm kind of playing to his ear, and he he comes up to me. He goes, "You got Corazon by LTG?"
Oye, caballero.
I was like, yeah, I got it. So I played it.
I started following DJs. And my first DJ that I met was John Jellybean Benitez. I met him at La Mariposa. La Mariposa was over there by Dykeman Street. And when I saw him, my boy Frank knew him and brought me to the booth. And I saw him and I looked at his records. Every record was crossed off. Every time he mixed, it was flawless.
I founded Public Enemy. Now, when I first met the group, Hank, Chucky D, Flavor Flav, Aaron, when I met Public Enemy, they were not called Public Enemy. They were called Spectrum City.
When I started to become a DJ, I played all music. You know, there wasn't just I played Southside records or I played music. When I started to scratch, which was relatively new at the time, or it was relatively young at the time, I should say. Me personally, I wanted to add my own flavor to the scratching that I did. So I started scratching as if I was playing my bongo. So bongos are counter instruments. They're counter instruments. So the conga keeps the rhythm, and the bongo plays against the conga. And the bongocero also drops the bongo to play the cowbell during the chorus to brighten it up. So these things I would integrate into my scratch. So as some scratches was like chick, chick, chicky, chicky, chick, 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 chicky, chicky, chick. Mine just so it was more staccato. It was more it was counter rhythm. It worked with the rhythm that I was scratching to.
There's another joint by Nico Gomez called Lupita.
¿Qué pasa, Lupita? No sé, ¿qué le pasa, Lupita? No sé, ¿qué le pasa, esta niña? No sé, ¿qué es lo que quiere? Bailar, pero no baila. Su papá, ¿qué dice su papá? Que no.
The first time I DJ with Bambata and the first time I DJ with Herc, this is not in the 70s, this is like late 90s. And playing Latin breaks and having, you know, godfathers of the culture, Herc coming up to me being like, yo, what record is that?
People were hustling and people were dancing. You see guys dancing toward each other. And they were doing a different type of dance.
In a 2019 article written by Cassidy George for Vice, it reads, "Some say hip-hop begins with the DJ, but actually, hip-hop culture itself begins with the b-boy. We're the X factor," says first-generation b-boy Charlie Rock, a.k.a. Anthony Horn. He traces breaking back to the 60s, when Latinos across New York started rocking or uprocking, setting mambo-inspired moves to the latest rock and soul hits. Rocking was inspired by battle dances and performed like a showdown. Those who honed in on its more aggressive components call these elaborate dance disses burning. The original foundation, called the rock dance, is the head. And that would be the inspiration.
We spent hours and days perfecting this art form that came straight out of the Latino community. I've said many times, and I'll say it again, the original rock dance was a city-wide phenomenon. It was present in all boroughs: Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island.
The rock dance is the precursor to what would come to be known as floor rocking, top rocking, up rocking, down rocking, okay, going off, breaking.
The original rock dance was founded and developed in New York City dance clubs. The more notable ones were actually called juice bars at the time, included the Jungle, the Zoo, the Fudge Factory, the Forbidden Fruit, the Ruby Foo, the Sanctuary, the Kon-Tiki, the Fresh, the Footsteps, the Abbey, the Duplex, the Red and White, the Charisma, and the Bomba Macao. The DJ were highly instrumental and most fascinating piece of this urban phenomenon. It was them who discovered and made rock possible. The rock dance was to be created and developed through the music that Francis Grasso, Nick Sayano, and Mancuso, among the pioneers that played this music. Jelly Bean Benitez and Frankie Knuckles were proteges of this amazing process.
When you look at the early crews, you had the Bronx Boys Rocking Crew, you had Star Child The Rock, you had the Rockwell Association.
The music these DJs played was nowhere to be found or heard in mainstream dance venues. Never ever did these songs get played on the radio. This music that seduced and produced rock dancing was created by mostly black musicians, rock musicians, who gave us dancers the inspiration to do what we did. I'm referring to a funky, soulful type rock, founded and developed by the likes of Jimmy Castor. Just Begun, 1972. Baby Huey, Listen to Me, 1971. Abaco Dreams, Life and Death, 1969. James Brown, Give It Up and Turn It Loose, 1969. The Equal, Black Skin Blue Eyed Boy, 1968. Babe Ruth, The Mexican, 1972. And many, many others. This is the music that inspired our dance, hence why we called it rock. The same music that years later inspired breaking.
Most people, when you hear about the breaks, you just really think about the drum. The different instruments like the bongos and the conga and the timbales played a part in the background atmosphere. Until it was pointed out to me, I didn't really notice it until I started to listen to all the songs, the B-boys, considered the B-boy songs, and then go, oh, okay, actually there is bongos and congas and timbales, and with that drum, leading the way, right? That's basically the staple of the break is the drum kit, but they're playing this, they're enhancing the atmosphere with these instruments. In New York, those DJs wanted that sound. And it makes sense because New York is a melting pot, right? You have so many different cultures in New York. So, of course, different cultures are going to play into the influence of how you're going to mix what you want to, what's the sound?
A lot of congas and drumming. It's definitely the drums. I mean, I think that what we realize too is that we've had some opportunities to just have drums, and the realization with those patterns and with different sounds from the different styles of drumming and just different kind of drums, that is what our dance is to. You know what I mean? You could add a bunch of other stuff, and you could do stuff to horns, and you could do stuff but like the drums really informs our dance.
It's really the music, and the drums are just, it's ground zero for everything.
Rocking came from the term in the 70s. What we heard, the music was rock, R&B rock, so soul, R&B rock, soul, and all that. So that's where we got that from.
Cool, her taking those, taking the merry-go-round, 2 different records, then Flash, doing the quick mix theory and actually making it faster and smoother. That's what made the guys go off.
But that's what we heard was, when Lele used to hit it in 129, or Charlie Chase hit it in 118, he would drop, R&B rock, funk.
All the frenzied parts of the songs, like Baby Huey, the Yellow Sunshine part, Listen to Me.
Bats got into the top rocking. Yeah, so a lot of people used to do that. So got into that, and so Bats got into it. So he started with a bunch of guys. Oh man, we started dancing, blah. Next thing comes up, Bats said, you know what? I'm gonna ask Cash to see if I could come out with his own crew. Oh, and to see, but Cash and Shark didn't like dancing. Period. There was major rap artists and stuff. So Batch asked permission to see if he could, form a TBB rocking crew. And Cash gave him the go ahead, and that's when the Bronx Boys rocking crew was formed. The sounds of the cóngas or the bongos, the timbales.
It's that percussion, man. That is the heart and soul of any good breakbeat.
And the ruido, you could hear that scratching, and people be like, oh, and that, I'm getting goosebumps because it's, the traditional dance from the mambo, the salsa, or the funk, or that hard rock that really brought out the flavor and brought out the animal in us to want to go in there and hit the floor and hit the tops and all that.
The drums have always played a huge role in our music, in our lifestyle, whether those are cóngas, timbales. I mean, the list goes on of our instrumentation that, we made popular in our music.
Just Begun or Sex Machine or Planetary Citizen or any type of music that had that percussion, that had those break beats.
It's all percussion. But, the breakers, it was percussion. And even, out of all the type of music I'd love to rap to, I'd love the music with percussion.
The Latin percussion allows the rhythmic element of the top rocks to react in a different way. And I know, a lot of people like, one thing that comes to mind is people will say, well, something that I used to always hear is, yes, this was created by African Americans, but yet Latinos are the ones that gave it flavor. And I'm like, that's one of those things where you're like, ooh, I don't, but that what they really mean is because of the drumming, because of the movement and the top styles that evolved from other top styles of dances in Latin communities, all informing this.
What we brought to the culture, right, is we brought flavor.
B-Boy Dolo. Some people know me as Lito, depending what part of the earth you from. I would probably say 5, 6. I remember my brothers coming in, my brother Mikey. All my brothers was into hip-hop, Reno, Marco. They were all into hip-hop, but just everybody was doing something differently. So, with me hearing a lot of Fania All-Star, just because my family listened to a lot of Latin and Cuban, African type of music. They always had a variety. So, listening to different types of music, you're going to appreciate a lot of different instruments and different sounds. With me, I like more of the cóngas, the bongós, and the timbales.
The last poets are, for me, the forerunners of rap. Because they were the ones coming. If you want to talk about militancy, you want to talk about black nationalism, you want to talk about the independence of Puerto Rico, our first drummer was a guy named Elijah,
who was versed and steeped in the tradition of Santeria, of Latin music, of the blues, and of jazz.
I was asked one day, where was the first Puerto Rican that you heard rapping? And I must say, you know, my guy, Tito. And we started the Fearless Four, myself and Tito.
For 79, I was 12 years old, but hearing the Sugar Hill Gang, I knew immediately that I wanted to rap, and I started venturing out into the neighborhood and seeing the jams. And, you know, we lived on 167, about a half a mile from the Fever and the Ecstasy Garage, so I would see the flyers. I knew that there was a culture and a vibrant society of MCs that the Sugar Hill Gang was a copy of.
When I moved up from the South Bronx up to the North Bronx on Fish Avenue and Boston Road, where there was a Stardust Ballroom, where they used to hold jams in Stardust Ballroom, and I went to Evander Childs, which was next to the T Connection, was underneath Gun Hill Road. So that's Evander Child. Pumpkin was frequently out there in clubs, and he was a drummer, an extraordinary drummer, bass player, and pianist. That was Pumpkin.
I was a graffiti writer in New York City by the name of Chic One. The crew was Salsa, and later on became Mr. Chic instead of just Chic.
So Pumpkin, when I met him, he was having a battle with a couple of other drummers. And I remember Pumpkin, and in Spanish, Pumpkin spoke Spanish. He could speak good Spanish. Oye, ven, ¿cómo está, man? Ven conmigo. Come on, I'm gonna invite you to my house, to mi casa. And then when I went to his house, he introduced me to his mother, his father, and they speaking Spanish to me.
My father had a bodega. He had a bodega right in the corner. The building across the street, when things were slow at the grocery store, my father would ask Julio to play music out front. And then the music brings a crowd. The crowd then starts buying from the bodega. Their beer, their cigarettes, their munchies, whatever. That's how I got to know the Mean Machine.
So he was the one that suggested, because I used to jam out with him in the garage, and he always wanted, you see, we traded off because I did the funky beat, I did the funky beat, right? So when I'm playing, if Pumpkin is boom, and I'm, right? But then you'll say solo.
Some time went by. My father sold the store, and he decided to move to South Carolina. So I told my dad I wanted to stay in New York. Some time went by. I lost my job, and because I lost my job, I couldn't pay rent, and I lost my apartment. And once I did that, now I'm homeless.
He told me, well, I'm going to form a little group because I got a producer, and I got a couple of guys, but I didn't know they were rappers. Rodney C, Keith, Kate Rockwell, and Jazzy Jab. It was only those four. Sha Rock didn't even show up. She wasn't there.
One day I saw Julio, and I said, hey, would you let me carry your equipment for some food money whenever you guys had gigs? And they said, yeah. They gave me a shot, and it worked out. So they bought me some clothing so I can do shows with them.
We jammed out, and then they wanted to do boom, 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 but they wanted to rock it, a little more, and add the percussion and just rock it like that.
Jimmy and Julio, they went to Sugar Hill record label. I didn't know they were going, and so then what our DJ did, he just mixed Dance to the Drummer's Beat. We took it with us to Sugar Hill Records. They took us to an office, and it was Sylvia Robinson, her husband, Joe Robinson, a guy named Milton, and then Jiggs Chase, the guy that orchestrates everything in the studio. The music comes on, they don't hear a voice. They go, where's the vocals? And we just said, we're going to do it live for you. And so they played the tape. We did the Spanish, and they're all like this, bobbing their heads to the music. They didn't understand a word. But then Sylvia gets up, shuts the tape off, and told us, come back next week. We'll have contracts ready for you guys. we told our DJ, mix up Grace Jones, pull up to my bumper. And he did that, and we took that to her. I was in the studio alone, and I thought to myself, man, nobody's doing this in Spanish. And I started doing it. And, you know, if there was somebody else doing it, I don't know.
Ahí nada más. Y la gente del medio tienen promedio. Huepa, huepa, ahí nada más. Y la gente de atrás no están en nada. Huepa, huepa, ahí nada más. Y eso fue lo que trajo el barco, mi gente, eso fue lo que traje yo. Así que fuego a la lata, agua que va a caer.
Puerto Rico, oh, Puerto Rico, oh, Puerto Rico, oh, Puerto Rico.
I created Puerto Rico in 1994. The reason why I created Puerto Rico in 1994 was because I wanted to send a statement to the hip-hop world, not only to the hip-hop world, but to the entire world, to let them know that Puerto Ricans and Latinos were here from day one.
I'll take my man Paradise, for instance. I didn't know where he was coming from. I know that he came around, we formulated the Throwdown 4. It was DJ Paradise and the Throwdown 4.
We came here with one thing in mind. We're not gonna leave till we say it. And then when we're done with our rhyme, you can go home and tell your moms.
1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. All right. Now let me have the crowd's attention for a second. I'm Grandmaster Cab from the Cold Crush Brothers. All right. Hold up. Now me and Charlie Chase is out here just chilling in the crowd like y'all. Turn the music on.
Puerto Rico Whole was taken from a mixtape which was titled Live Convention 1982. It was done by Grand Wizard Theater. There was a part there was two rap groups that were battling, and there was a part there where they screamed out Puerto Rico. I took that and looped it.
That you all can tell the theater, huh? He got the clientele all night, y'all. If it's all night, y'all. Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico.
The drum part was taken by the Lafayette and Afro Rock Band. Bass line was taken by the Fred Wesley and the JBs.
Yeah.
And then the drum rolls, it was taken from a classic R&B song, Heartbeat, by Tana Garner.
I was up in my man Daysky's and Lance's house, and we were practicing, and there was never a question about me being Puerto Rican because we were all going through the same struggles at the same time. I remember hiding food stamp books when my boys were coming over so they wouldn't see that I was on food stamps. And I'm sure they would hide them whenever I came to their house. But we were in that same struggle together, and there was no difference.
So, you know, I grew up in Harlem, like, as you know. Tito and I started the Fearless Four. We're both Puerto Rican. When we did jams in the park, it was nothing but black and Puerto Rican. That's it. That's what it was. And that started many, many, many years ago. We did plenty of jams in the park.
Puerto Rico was the record that broke a lot of barriers, broke a lot of doors, you know, down for a lot of Puerto Rican rappers and even Latino rappers. It was hard to get into the hip hop scene back then. The only rapper that was toe to toe with me was Fat Joe. He just finished coming out with Flo Joe and his album, and he was making a lot of noise in the hip hop underground scene. You know, Puerto Rico was a party record, so it had more leverage to play in clubs and play in radio stations because it was a party song. You know what I'm saying? And when they added in Hot 97 and different stations across the country, that's I believe that we broke a lot of barriers for a lot of Puerto Rican rappers.
In the middle of little did we know that we riddle to middleman who didn't do diddly.
Puerto Ricans are not guests in the house of anybody. Certainly not in the house of hip hop. We were there from the beginning. We helped develop it. We formulated it in some cases. And we also did that with breaking.
We opened the door just like black people, just like everyone else. Puerto Ricans, it's a family affair. Listen, mom and dad gets credit, but so do the brothers, the sisters, the cousins, the uncles, the aunts, and so forth and so on.
I never realized there was a difference. same struggle, living the same life each other's living. It was a given. We made the necessary decisions to make the best of the circumstances that we were given. Same welfare, the same food stamps, same crooked cops, the same jails, the same boot camps, same judges say who can and they say who can't, but only the hood ever get to say who's champ.
I don't feel that Latinos are guests in the culture of hip hop in the least. You know, once Bam sort of took the threshold of how to push this culture forward, and he was very much about inclusivity. And, you know, one of the tenets of the earliest sort of guidelines was, you know, peace, unity, and love, right? And so it's always had the opportunity to bring people together. When we look at how Lee Quiñones was the #1 most wanted writer by the MTA police in the 70s, it's not debatable, right? When we look at how all the Puerto Rocks of the 70s and 80s contributed to the dance form and allowed it to be international, you know, by their impact. And that helped hip hop and rap music in specific grow. When we look at, you know, just every facet of what we call hip hop, you know, we see not just contributions, but presence and support and like ingenuity. I mean, you go to the 90s now, right? Then it's like, who's the most recognized voice on underground radio? It's basically me, right? Like, you know, college radio in New York. And then that's not to say there weren't other amazing personalities, but basically like me and Stretch we were that show in the 90s on the underground. Who was the #1 air personality on commercial radio? Andy Martinez. You know, I don't think that's by accident that the 90s in New York, the epicenter of the culture, that you have two Boricuas on both sides of the radio spectrum that are really like creating a positive impact for everyone, not just for Puerto Ricans, and not just for everyone, right? For everyone.
In the ghettos of New York in the 1970s, it was black and brown that were both in the struggle, okay? That socioeconomic struggle. And it's because of that struggle that we were able to create this platform for expression, right? For empowerment. And that platform is, as we know it today, hip hop culture.
Rap becomes like the main fixture that is out of the hip hop space, that's influencing people how they interpret the culture. And because rap music was exclusively looked at as like a black thing, then people started thinking that, well, the whole hip hop culture is a black thing.
A bunch of people, regardless of what their culture was, decided to start a new way of doing things. That new way of doing things has become a culture. Now, the people that jumped in and contributed brought along elements of their culture. But the result isn't any one of the individual's cultures. It's a brand new culture.
Why do people try to divide us that way? We have these new kids who I consider ignorant. They're not well read historically, anthropologically, so they think that they, as they say on the street, they be the only ones. It's not true, yo. Get over this.
In my hood, it was black and brown. And when I went to the city to visit relatives up in the Bronx or in Manhattan, it was black and brown. In Brooklyn, it was black and brown. This is a culture of black and brown individuals.
Historically, we are together. And to have people say that Puerto Ricans had nothing to do with hip hop is madness. Go to the Bronx. It started there.
Let's go back to the 80s, right? Mr. Magic, who's recognized as the foundational hip hop radio pioneer, is Latino.
Good evening to your super listeners. How you doing tonight, all you fly guys and fly girls? Welcome once again to the world famous Mr. Magic Rap Attack. And of course, I am Sir Juice, your host for the next 3 hours as we kick off 30 minutes of non-stop music.
Mr. Magic debuted in 1979 on WHBI in New York City with Disco Showcase on the Pay-for-Time FM station. It was a far cry from the prime time in New York. What he didn't realize was that he was starting the very first rap radio show. A few short years would go by and Frankie Crocker, program manager for Inner City Broadcasting, took his rising star to commercial powerhouse WBLS with the first exclusive rap radio show to be aired on a major station. Rap Attack, Magic Show featured Marley Marl as the DJ and Tyrone Fly Ty Williams as the show's co-producer. Magic moved full-time to WBLS in July of 1982. His reign on the New York City airwaves lasted 6 years and was instrumental in broadcasting the scope and validity of hip-hop music. He would be known as the voice of the city. And did you know that Mr. Magic was Puerto Rican?
Puerto Ricans have always been a part of hip hop culture. I mean, I think it's really important to remember that, you know, hip hop was packaged up back in the day. You understand? A lot of those elements existed. Graffiti existed before hip hop was a term, right? It was just sort of consolidated into this great package in the 80s. And we were able to give it a name and break it down into components. You know, we compartmentalized everything. But Puerto Ricans, and I want to say Latins in general, because there were Cuban brothers and Dominican brothers that were in the hood with us getting it in. But I'm going to speak for myself as a Puerto Rican. We were there from day one, as far as I'm concerned.
This happens because of miseducation. And our teachers have to change that. Our parents have to change that. It's together that it was done. Puerto Ricans had tremendous influence on hip hop.
I know what my contributions are. I can tell just by listening to the breaks that every DJ cut, including her, well, he didn't really cut, but I'm talking about he played, that they had a part of my culture infused in. Does that mean my culture created it? Nobody's culture created this. Individuals created this that came from different cultures. And they brought pieces of their cultures with them. And that's the beautiful thing about hip hop. If we lose that, if it turns into a, no, we bought it and we allowed you to be in it.
And at least from the standpoint where I started, when I started seeing Fantastic and Cold Crush and these people, there were always Puerto Ricans in there. So it's impossible to be a guest in a house that you helped build, because, you know, Ruby D didn't just pop up on stage one day. You know, there was a lot of practice and a lot of time and a lot of work that went into him getting to that stage. And Whip a Whip, you know, and then a little later on, Tito, Master OC.
As a Puerto Rican DJ, I knew everybody. You know, we started going to the Fever up in the Bronx. I was part of the Zulu. I am part of the Zulu Nation. Africa Islam was the one that gave me my badges for the Zulu Nation. That was back in 1978. So you know how far back we go.
The documentary film Star Wars, which is to this day the most accurate and best documentary ever made on hip hop culture, our presence in there is undeniable. As writers, as b-boys, homeboys chilling out, writer's bench or what have you. I mean, you have to understand, hip hop is from the ghettos of New York. And if you go through the ghettos of New York, black and brown make up the hood as we know it. So how can we ever be denied the props and the value that we've contributed to the culture? As far as I'm concerned, that's a house that Black and Brown built, and both of our names are on a deed. We both live in that home. So we could never, ever, ever be a guest in a home that we helped build.
Hip hop was not started by any one particular race. It was all of us together.
Music is free to everybody. Everybody wanted to be a musician. Whether you were black, white, Latino, this, that, and the other, the foundational instrument of music is the drums. So you walk from one corner to another, you see a jam session on a corner with bunch of guys playing congueros. And they were black, brown, even whites. I grew up across the street from St. Mary's Park. DJ AJ grew up in my same building. Okay? Case One, One Armed Jeff, one of the most famous graffiti writers in the world. We all grew up in the same Jackson projects. This culture we're talking about doesn't discriminate where you're from, what color skin you are. It doesn't discriminate.
Today, people want to downplay the Latino role in hip-hop. Yep. They are so stupid. Yep. Really. Word. Hip-hop would not have existed without them. Without specifically Puerto Rican. Word. And specific. Cubans were here. Haitians were here. Dominican Republic was here. Everybody was here. All of South America been in the Bronx. Okay? But Puerto Ricans in particular sided with the black folk here, and the Jamaicans were coming in as well. And this group of Puerto Ricans, Jamaicans, and American blacks made hip-hop. Not American black, not Puerto Rican, not Jamaican. All of them made the culture.
Allow me to break down the Latin breakdown, a takedown of lies being replaced now. Fact focused now, welcome to my open house, to hear the truth coming straight from the horse's mouth. Allow me to define the word descarga, means discharge or go off, it's not a genre. The break part of the song, only percussion, not really up for debate, a hateful discussion. Timbales, clave, la maraca, la conga, plena palinque, mambo, salsa, bomba. To teach with love, a teacher I must become. So lesson one, let's begin with just begun. When Jimmy Castor sparked the break dances, influenced by Latin percussion, it's a great anthem. It helped inspire more footwork than the centipede for foundational B-boys from the 70s. The Bronx Boys rockin' crew in 75. South Soul Star Child was kicking it live. The Rockwell Association and Rock Steady. You thinking you can handle the truth, you're not ready. Not prepared for what y'all don't know. I James Brown used the rhythms of Guaguanco. You focusing on 50 years at Yankee Stadium. I'm talking 1940s at the Palladium. Duke Ellington, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, with Tito Puente and Mambo Kings become famous. Jazz musicians, Birdland, Johnny Pacheco, Dexter Gordon, and Quincy Jones, Ray Barretto. They influenced each other straight from the rip hop. So why would it stop what we got to hip hop? John Griggs, percussion master, the lost star, the brotherhood playing with the Fania All-Stars. And not just in the crowd, we were the co-stars. We are not guests in hip hop like most stars. Drums, we been drumming since the 1500s. Predate the hate debates we couldn't have seen coming. The element you're forgetting is called brotherhood. But y'all come from a different time, another hood. Allow me to break down the Latin breakdown, a takedown of lies being replaced now. Fact focused now, welcome to my open house, to hear the truth coming straight from the horse's mouth. Fact focused now, welcome to my open house, to hear the truth coming straight from the horse's mouth.